Okay, this is Rose Diamond from Tribe in Transition, and we're talking today in the series of Transforming Grief and Loss. And today I'm really happy to have with me Sundi Gilchrist, who is a coach for parents of estranging adult children. So, Sundi, welcome.
Thank you, Rose. Thank you.
So let's just start with, people may not have any idea what that really means. You want to just start by telling us a little bit about what it is to be a parent of estranging adult children.
So this was an unknown to me as well, and I think for many people it seems sort of unbelievable that adult children could disconnect to their parents in ways and reject their parents whilst they are adult children. And it happened, it was my experience for me that I got divorced, and over a period of 14 years, and with a lot of toing and froing and conversations and upsets and events, I now finally have none of my adult children. I've got 3 adult daughters, all in their 30s. So for the last 14 years, it's been since I divorced their dad, since we got divorced. There's been a series of events that have just finally culminated in me not having any contact with them. And up until 2016, I did have a little bit of connection. Well, I had a lot of connection with one adult daughter and her children. So not only have I lost all my family of creation, I have also lost contact with my grandchildren. So the loss that I've gone through for me has been that foundation. My own experience has been my foundation to then step into this surreal world of supporting, coaching, guiding, leading parents from all over the world through basically a grieving process. And that has been amazing and enlightening and informing. And I've learned so much in the last 3 years around my own experience of this, but also the general wider aspects of estrangement, where an adult child chooses to cut their parents out of their life or parent, and the varying degrees of that, whether it's physical or emotional or both, or however parents feel around being rejected by their adult children.
That sounds absolutely heartbreaking to have, it sounds like your daughters have rejected you, or to have lost your daughters and your grandchildren. That sounds heartbreaking. And would you be willing to share some of your own process around how you've managed to move through that, the stages of grief for you in that? Or
yes, yeah. So the first one was panic and denial, and it was my youngest daughter who took the first strong step. And on 2 occasions when I was waiting to speak with her or trying to catch her coming out of work, or she'd got police to move me on. And slowly but surely the realization came that this young woman was serious, totally serious, that she didn't want me, need me in any shape or form. And my process with her, the letting go process, became exacerbated when she got pregnant. And that's when I realized that actually she was absolutely serious. And this was like 5 years down the line of her first disconnect. So all that time I was sort of holding myself in a place of denial, hope, creativity. I was a chaser. So what I mean by that was that I wasn't somebody, if somebody snubbed their nose at me, that I would not take that as a no. I would not pull back from that and think, okay. And I have to say at this point, if I was to do all this again, that would be my very first action, would be that if anybody treated me with any sort of disdain, disrespect, disregard, any of those disses, I would leave. And that has been my biggest lesson, because my chasing actually landed me in a court and having a restraining order put on me at the end of it, that I just couldn't contact any of them, well, one daughter anymore. So the process of letting go and realizing, going through the anger, the grief, and then of course the menopause came in all of that as well. So that helped me. I say that in inverted commas, because there was no hiding from this emotional tsunami that was going through me. And now looking back, I believe that all of my losses from early years right through were all coming out in this portal of grief and loss around the fact that my children didn't want me anymore. And there's so much to say around it, Rose. It affected my other relationships, it's affected my health, it's affected my occupation. There's not one corner of my life that this rejection of my adult children hasn't touched. And I have not experienced the death of a child. And there was a time in the beginning when I wished that I don't know whether wished is the right word, I sensed that it possibly could have been easier if the child that was rejecting me at the time had died, because there was that sense of finality. With an estrangement, there's always this possibility that they could come back, whatever that means. And also the other losses that come along the way, the fact that you don't go to special occasions, you don't go to weddings, you're not included in the grandchildren's lives. So there's like all this, for me, there was like this forethinking, oh my goodness, I won't get to witness this, I won't get to go to that. So it was like I was forward grieving as well, prepping myself for some of the losses that I may experience. And I realised in 2016, looking back on that event, there was significant events in 2016, which was the final releasing of me from this long tunnel of let go, grief and loss, that to some extent, I let my granddaughter go with the best possible way that I could have done, which was I was holding her, she was 4 at the time. And I said to her that, I don't think I'm going to get to see you for quite a while. And then I said her name, and then I cuddled her and she cuddled me. And I said, just remember me, don't forget me. And I love you. And then I put her down, and then that was the last time that I touched that little girl. And I was very close to this little girl. And so looking back on that event, that's when I realised that I could handle myself in a real sense of real loss and let go.
I can actually feel pain in my heart when I'm listening to you. I can totally understand. Well, I can not totally understand because I haven't had that similar experience, but how long it's taken and how you had to move through that sort of denial and hope and, can I make this right? And totally understand your desire to sort of chase and try to fix it. And then I imagine slowly over time just coming to some kind of acceptance, which is what grief is about, isn't it? We have to finally come to a place of acceptance and then let go and just live with it. But of course there's always, whether you lose someone through death or in this case they're still alive, in a way you're saying that's even worse, and I can see that. But you kind of let go, but you never fully let go. There's always part of you that's kind of still connected and still holding a space for, I imagine, for reconciliation. It's a huge process.
It's very interesting because obviously we're living in the moment with this coronavirus, the start of it. And I have reached out and I've sent an email, and I'm not sure whether I'm blocked or not. And my siblings are sort of disconnected from the process with me a bit as well. They don't understand. They don't want to be involved. They're quite critical, judgmental of me, or they have been. Possibly we're moving to a less judgmental position at the moment. They're all a lot older than me. So that dynamic. Our parents have died a long time ago, so there's the 5 of us siblings together, and all of us have got children, and my siblings do have some connection with my adult daughters. And it's interesting with this coronavirus, you know, it's like there's a sense that this emergency, this unprecedented arrival of this virus and the things that we're living through would somehow spur us to reconnect, and yet it's not happening. And there's another layer of how serious this is for them to distance themselves for whatever reason from me, and that they are true in their intention around this. You know, even this coronavirus isn't going to bring them into some reconnection with me. And I know for the other people that I'm working with, you know, that is quite befuddling in a way. It's like another layer of understanding that our children are serious in their choice for whatever reason.
Yeah, so they're really asserting their own authentic choices, aren't they? And drawing their own boundaries, and ultimately you can only respect that. You know, there's actually really nothing else that you can do.
No,
So,
and in a way, it sort of strengthens. There's part of me that's thinking, because as a parent, there is this thing around my understanding of parenting, and I could go into a long discussion around how we've built up parenting to be something that is a little bit shoots us all in the foot in a way, because both sides of the coin. And you know, like my children don't need me, they just don't. And for me to, and I've always wanted to be wanted, and neither do they want me. And I didn't really want to be needed, and yet I feel that I have at this age in my life, you know, and where I've come in my own journey, that I can be sort of some resource to them, and they've chosen not, you know. And where was I going with this? It was something around the fact that I admire their choice, and sometimes when I really get into my body and can feel that honouring of their decision, I'm blown away by that, because it's opposite to what I would really want. And that brings me into the whole equation about love and how much I love them to be the people that they are choosing to be on their own journey, and all the judgments and ideas and beliefs that I have around them are just that, mine, not necessarily theirs.
yeah.
I could make up so many stories in my mind about them, and they came through me as a mother. They came through me, and that's all.
Yeah.
That's everything, and that's all that I did.
Well, and they also share that same warrior strength that you have. You know, that's what they're demonstrating, and that's what you have as well. So, yeah, it must have been or still, I'm sure it still is, enormous developmental journey for your spiritual journey to be able to sort of reach this place of acceptance, and also to sort of detach yourself from not taking it all personally. It must be terribly difficult not to take this personally, and not to sort of, you know, take it on and you know, feel guilt or shame, or that you're a bad person, or, you know, that's a big journey.
It was a big journey, and, you know, very briefly, historically, I've come from an abusive background, which I would think that many, many, many of us have. You know, I was hit and yelled at as a child, and I went on to do that with my daughters. And there was a moment where I realised this, and I talked to them about it and apologised for how I'd been. And at some level, I can understand that is still carried within them, you know, and like it is still with me. I got complete with my dad. I was okay at the end. You know, I did an amazing personal growth leap. And within hours, I'd gone and thanked him for my childhood, and told him that I loved him, and he cried because he knew, and he was an older man by then. And he said I'd worried whether you had a nice childhood. And at some level, you know, he'd beaten me up occasionally. When I say beaten me up, he'd really lashed out hard on my left-hand side of my body. You know, his right hand would come just in moments of like rage, which I recognize in myself, that I had this upsurge of volcano and then it was gone. And I recognize that in me, and I've seen it in at least one of my daughters. And the worst thing for me, well, maybe not the worst thing, but one event that sticks in my mind is when I was seated and I saw my daughter treating my granddaughter, and I saw myself as an older version of both of those people. And that was very painful to watch this little girl being subjected and putting me into that little girl, and looking at the adults that were shouting at me and thinking, what have I done? You know, and I remember that as a child. Why are you treating me like this? And then also seeing myself in my daughter being the bully, you know, being the one that was inflamed with this passionate energy. And I now know what led me to that. You know, I can make sense of what fired me in that way. And it was about not feeling in control, I suppose, of me and in my surroundings, you know, like being pressured to do things that I didn't want to do, or things not going right. You know, my response would be one of flare of anger. And I think my dad was the same, and I think one of my daughters is the same. This propensity that we had, if that's the right word, to release our pent-up frustrations through a hot flame of anger, of flare, you know. So not only am I working with estrangement, I guess I'm tackling the abuse, and running, the thread that's running through that is like grieving, accepting, moving through all that realization and loss.
Yeah, and just that is deep shadow work, isn't it? So looking into those parts of yourself that you don't really want to see and saying, oh, actually, yes, I do have this anger. I have abused people. And I'm saying that from myself as well, because as I was telling you before, you know, my father was also traumatized me. And I guess one of the ways that I didn't pass that on was I chose not to have children. But, you know, I'm sure if I had children, I also have that ability to just explode in rage. I mean, it hardly ever happens. It's happened very few times, but it's there. You know, the potential is there. So, but I think in myself, you know, knowing those really uncomfortable places in myself makes me much more understanding of human nature. You know, it helps me to accept you know, I'm not condoning anybody who's violent, but it helps me to see, yeah, that's in me too. I know that, you know, so, and I think it's so important that we're doing this kind of deep shadow work at this time, because it's the only way that we're going to get to be one world, one humanity, is by actually recognizing that we all have this shadow, and it's our responsibility to. Nobody else is going to turn it around for us. We have to sit, as you've been doing, through these really difficult years of grieving, looking deep within, letting go. Yeah. So it's a big undertaking and a courageous journey. And I always felt that my dad was my best teacher, because he forced me, and in a way, your daughters are being your best teachers, aren't they?
I think they're just, for me, I think I see that they're just continuing the work that started in my family of origin. You know, if for me, if we don't get the lessons with our parents, we get it with our spouse or partner. If we don't get the lessons with the partner, we get it with our children. If we don't get it with our children, we get it with our grandchildren. And that's what I see. I see some people are treated just equally as poorly by their grandchildren.
Yeah.
And there seems to be a general theme that the majority of people who are estranged, it's interesting, and most of us are somebody who would ignore, not have boundaries, not be able to say this isn't acceptable, you know, would tolerate other people's behaviours, possibly because that's what we did in our family of creation, that we tolerated our parents' treatment of us and so on and so forth. And It's interesting looking at it. It's like, and there's not much evidence, or not evidence, but statistics around it all, and some general themes coming out. You can see patterns, and it's led me into a work that is really fulfilling, and where I feel really grounded and solid, and developing a service that is, what I see is there's a process of going through the grieving process, and then we get into this sort of like no person's land, where we can choose to harden our hearts and close down and shut up shop, basically, as I call it, or we go on this self-exploring journey and move through this and expand. We either contract or expand. That's what I see. And then also I'm beginning to see that our children come back, and many parents are, the contracted ones are very resistant to that. I'm all right, I don't want to go through all that pain again. Aren't willing. And then there's this whole conversation about love, and like if you love somebody, it's like you open your heart, and yes, we are going to get hurt, until we have some resources and learn some communication skills, feelings management, and those are the two main things that I've developed. This how we communicate with people, so it's kind, loving, and primarily it's about honoring ourselves and not compromising ourselves so that the other person, And then the feelings management. How do we stand in the eye of a stormy sea and stay grounded and not get swept away into our old habitual patterns of behavior? So those are the two things that I feel very passionate about, handling that. And that works with the grief work as well. So handling the emotional waves, handling when we have meltdowns, when we go into distress, and being this channel for some grief to come through, as I've had some amazing experiences through this. I've learned the noise that I make. I've learned the body positions that I like to get in. I like, noticing what supports me in grieving well, and who I want around me, if it's possible, because sometimes they come unannounced. And yet, looking back now, my real grief learning has been when I've been in a health space with somebody else or a group of people. That's where I've felt that I could step beyond that frightening space and go into that real deep grieving process, which lasts anything from 2 minutes to quarter of an hour to half an hour, where I am releasing something out of my body and learning that is okay, and learning that is my way of grieving, just like laughing is, just like singing, my own particular pattern of grieving, and encouraging other parents to explore that for themselves online in a group, and it's not easy when it's online. And yet I'm making a difference. And for me, even if I just make a difference to one person, I've done a good job, and I'm making a difference. So I work mainly with mothers, and for me, what I see is the women are being called to step up at this time, a rising of the feminine, and we can't do that if we've closed our hearts and holed up in our homes and just having online deliveries and not connecting with people.
Yeah, exactly. I've just been thinking about the connection between estrangement and what's going on at the moment, where we're being told to, keep apart, stay isolated, and what that's actually going to bring up for people who are, I find it challenging, and I've done, like you, I've done a lot of inner work, but for somebody who hasn't done any or much inner work, or have the kind of skills that you're talking about, suddenly to be cooped up in a small space, possibly with family who, with the family difficulties, I think it's going to be majorly challenging for people, just dealing with those kind of, that inner experience of what it's like to have your to be estranged from the world, yeah. And then the other part of that is how most of us have used running around and getting and doing to to be estranged from ourselves. So I think that's it's a big theme, you know, for the whole of humanity, really, is like how we come home to ourselves, you know.
Yeah, I agree. And it did occur to me that so many people are experience this not being to be able to connect with the family. And in some ways, you know, there's a whole army of estranged parents who have that experience, albeit without the angry, you know, the anger that's associated with the fact that our kids are disconnected. Their anger, I suppose, against us, or whatever it is that we perceive they feel. And how to deal with that, you know, so there's a whole bundle of people who perhaps could be spreading some support and some guidance around how to deal with this.
Yeah. So in your own personal experience, Cindy, and with those that you work with, what are some of the key, you know, you've mentioned certain skills, what are some of the key things that have helped you through this, or help the women that you're working with through this?
So the first thing is that I coined it a living bereavement, because it's a death of a relationship, really, not a death of a life. And so recognizing that it actually is a bereavement, that has been a useful thing to allow myself to go into grieving, which in the initial stages, I didn't realize I was in a grieving process. You know, I just didn't. Learning those things that I've learned, that I said, you know, how to process my grief, you know, learning my grief song, if you like, you know, I don't know if that's, you know, all the facets of that, you know, the noise that I make, the movements that I make, out my own personal grief language, if you like, and how that is particular to everybody. I learned about chasing. I learned I learned that I was willing, and this is hard for me that was a hard lesson. I learned I was willing to stay with people who were treating me unkindly. That was a hard lesson. Because I was so used to, because of my childhood, so used to keep putting myself back into the arena with somebody who
keep trying, just try again. You must try harder.
But even a step more than that, you know, that I was willing at some level to keep putting myself back into that space. And I really would have liked somebody to perhaps help me. This would have been useful too. And we have to do it our own way. We have to go to the hot spot. We have to go keep getting burnt until we're fed up of being burnt.
Yeah,
that's what
absolutely.
I've learned.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's almost like you want somebody to rescue you from being burnt. I would have loved somebody to say, just say goodbye to them, and then I'll sit on you for 6 months and not let you get in contact with them. And that isn't going to happen. I had to be my own jailer, if you like, to stop me from going back into that. It was the police in the end that helped me with that one. So there are people who do help you to not go back into those situations.
But also what you're talking about is you just keep coming up again and again against your own pattern until it gets so painful. You just say, I can't do this anymore. But sometimes there's a huge cost, because those things are so deeply ingrained in us that to actually get beyond that, which is the gift of spiritual freedom once we've got beyond it. But the costs in human terms can be enormous. In my experience also. Yeah,
just one more try.
Yeah.
And then expectations. So learning about expectations has been, you know, the things that my beliefs, you know, like the beliefs that I had, if I throw enough energy at it, I can make it change. No. That was another massive lesson, you know.
It's learning about your own limitations, isn't it? It's like, you know,
stepping into surrender, and self-respect, you know, self-honoring, and that I've always had that bubbling away, or at least I thought that was sort of like a baseline for me. I've always felt that I've looked after myself. I've put myself as number one, even when I was subjecting myself to some sort of abusive type behaviour in myself and in others. And yet that, I think I've come back to that touchstone that actually it all starts and ends with me, and how I had to fight this part of me that was always thinking it was selfish to do that. You know, I was very much labelled with selfish, and interesting how that, you know, I've managed to let go of that belief that I was selfish for wanting my life the way that I wanted it. And yeah, so lots of lessons, lots.
Yeah. And did you see it as a sort of spiritual path, or at any time because that's often the way that I help myself through things. I say, oh, you know, I've kind of attracted this, I've chosen this at a soul level, you know, even though I hate it, and it's, you know, it's really hard. It's like, I know, you know, I've somehow chosen it because this is what I need to learn. Was that the case for you?
Yeah, it was. I did see that I was attracting. I do believe that I attract the lessons that I need to, for me to expand and become and let go of old patterns. And I remember as a child that I was always interested in why do I do it like that? Why, you know, I had this why going on, and I actually liked looking underneath my stones to see what little grubby things are under there. And now I can look, you know, there's very few locked cupboards, and the ones that are locked I'm not aware of, so maybe they will come forward as I get older still. At the moment, you know, if I find something new aspects to myself, I'll fling open that cupboard door and say, come on, let's have a look at you then. Let's see what I'm dealing with, you know? And, yeah, I'm reminded I had a boyfriend who committed suicide, and I remember the way that my brain processed that was that the first time I saw him hanging at the end of this rope was quite horrific, and I didn't actually see him, and I knew that he'd hung himself. So I remember sharing this with a friend, and she said, why on earth did you do that? Why did you have that thought? And it's almost like, well, how do you stop your thoughts? And you can't. But every time, you know, I would put him behind the cupboard doors, and then I would choose sometimes to say, come on then, show me your worst. Let me feel it. Let me experience it, you know, even if it's just in my imagination, because that then helped me to process it and to move through that loss, you know, that this man had chosen to end his life, and I'd had a relationship with him. So, you know, the way that I've explored myself in how I handle loss, change and death and grief has it's been an interesting one. Very grateful to my soul that it's actually, I've got a good soul. She's on my side.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sort of recognizing that you know, these are soul choices. For me, it helps me with the surrender. It helps me, you know, at a certain point not to take it personally. Yeah, just to see it as potentially a gift, or a number of gifts, actually. Yeah, so wonderful work you're doing, Sundi, and
Thanks, Rose.
all of this stuff is so relevant to what's going on in the world today, and so needed. And it's definitely part of my mission. Is I think if we all had these skills of, you know, processing our grief and loss, facing our mortality, that everything would change. You know, so and then, you know, like yourself and myself, to be able to turn around what appears to be misfortune into gifts that you can then offer others. Wonderful, really.
Yes, I often say that my daughters gave me lemons and I made lemonade.
Yeah. Yeah, hopefully you had some honey to put in it as well.
Yes. The bittersweet of it all.
Yeah. So, I mean, we could go on talking, you know, for hours about this, but I kind of feel like, it's been a really intense little offering here, and I think we've done enough for today. So thank you so much for coming and
You're welcome.
talking with me and with us, and sharing. I'm sure what you've shared will touch many people in many different ways.
Thanks, Rose.
Yeah. And it doesn't end, does it? I mean, even though you've done this massive, massive work, there's always more layers of the onion. It's like a long time ago when I started on my spiritual path, I thought it was going to be this place of enlightenment where I could just,
hang out,
live in bliss, and I do experience bliss, even with the current crisis, I have times of deep peace and bliss, but, you can't, I can't shut myself off from the suffering of the world, so I think that's kind of, we have a role to play, don't we? So thank you so much for playing yours. It's with as much heart and warrior skills as you have.
Thank you. I'm grateful. My parents, their aspect of their lives that have furnished me with qualities that I can see that I inherited. It's like sometimes I get a sense, I was plonked on this earth at this time to do this work. I'm in the right place at the right time with the right events, with the right people. And it just feels good. It feels good. I feel like I can be of service, that I have a purpose, that I can bring something and have a great time doing it too, which sounds bizarre.
Oh, absolutely, because it's deeply fulfilling, isn't it, to be able to help people in that way. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and also you keep choosing to step up into that as well. It's not just that it's all kind of, this is the right time and right place. You have chosen to step up and use the opportunities, and you keep doing that every day. That's the choice,
How am I going to show up today?
Yeah, exactly. How am I going to show up today? And, some days get it wrong, and then the next day, okay, well, I'll make a different choice today, and I'll have another go and be kind to myself. And, yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Sundi.
You're welcome. That was great. Thanks, Rose. Thanks very much.